Hi friends, I'm working on a Pelican Tote and I wanted to show you my boxed bottom. So we're going to start at the very beginning with our cutting. We just don't want to cut our bottom curves. So go ahead and follow the cutting video. Just when you get to those exterior and those lining pieces with that bottom curve, we just want to cut it square. After you get those cut, you can follow the exterior and interior videos on putting your exterior and interior together. And you want to get all the way to where you're sewn together. So this is my interior. I am doing the recessed zipper. You might have your magnets basted onto here instead. And I've got my edges sewn together, and I still followed my taper. So I've got my seam allowance starting here, the same as my exterior, and then I did taper in. The only difference when I sewed this together is I sewed each side individually. I backstitched at the top and I sewed straight off the bottom. And then with the other side, I backstitched at the top and sewed straight off at the bottom. Again, following my taper. And then for my bottom, I just went straight across all the way edge to edge. And that is at the seam allowance that your taper is. So if you tapered in 5/8 inch, your bottom will be 5/8 all the way across. If you tapered in 3/4, your bottom will be 3/4 all the way across. And then with your exterior, it's the same as the video. Top stitching at the top pieces. Again, I sewed the sides individually straight down, straight off the bottom. And then my bottom is at the same seam allowance all the way across. So once you get to that point and you get those sewn together, now we're going to do our boxed bottom. So this will be, instead of putting that pleat in the curve, we're going to make a boxed bottom. You're just going to need a ruler and a marking utensil. I'm just using a Sharpie on this white interfacing so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to go a 2.5 inch square. You can certainly go bigger if you want your bottom to be deeper, but that's going to make your overall bag shorter because you're taking away from those sides. I find a 2.5 is a good, it ends up with a good height for your bag and a deep enough bottom. So you're just going to mark that 2.5 inches. And the reason I do this after it's sewn is so that all of the pieces are even. Instead of cutting the squares individually and then sewing them together, this way I'm cutting the scrap off together and these will be exactly the same size. And I do that on both my interior and exterior. And once those are marked, we're just going to cut out those squares. You don't really want to do that with your rotary cutter because you'll end up with little notches into your fabric. So I do with my scissor, and I'm right-handed, so I start on the furthest right side of the box. And I trim in, and I snip with my tip right where those lines intersect. And then I come in, instead of coming in from the bottom again and trying to snip at the same point, I come in where I snipped and I trim that out. And that way you have a nice square here and you don't have any snip marks up into your bag. So I'll show you on that corner. So this time I'll be coming in from the bottom instead of the side. Again, because I'm right-handed. I'll snip until they intersect, and I'll cut those scraps off. And do that for both the exterior and lining. we are going to do the same thing for the interior as we are the lining. You'll notice I have not trimmed any seam allowances like we did in the other video. I haven't trimmed the seam allowances yet. I'm going to show you on the interior because it's thinner and easier to manipulate, but you're going to do the same thing on both. Just open that zipper there. I'm just inside my bag, and there's that hole I cut out. I'm just going to flip it up and I'm going to pull it the opposite direction. So I want those seams to meet right there, and this is why I didn't trim them, because I want to open them. I want to have enough space to open those. I'm just opening those seams right up and making sure they meet right there in the center. And you can pull as much of the bulk of the bag apart as you need to get those corners lined up in a nice straight line. Right? So now we have a new seam, and we're going to stitch across here at the same seam allowance as for the lining, the same seam allowance as your taper. So it'll be the side seam allowance and the bottom seam allowance that meet. And then on your exterior, you will make sure that you stitch across that at the seam allowance that you gave your exterior. So for mine, my exterior is going to be a 1/2 inch seam, and my interior is going to be a 3/4 inch seam right here. And you'll do that for all 4 of the corners that we just made. All right, I have all 4 of my corners sewn, 2 on my interior, 2 on my exterior. And for my interior, I did pink that seam there, so it'll fit nice in my bag. And I left the seam in my exterior hole, and I've got that one turned right side out for you. So you can see that nice square bottom. All of your seams should be lined up. So you have the seam, this is the boxed seam that we sewn, this is our side seam, and this is our bottom seam, and they should come here in a nice cross there, all the way across the bottom. And that's nice and square for you. There's a shot of the inside, and then it'll stand up on its own. All right, so you can head back over to the finishing video and put your pieces together. And now you have a boxed bottom on your Pelican tote.